I have a problem. I have a tale to tell, but I'm not sure how to start it. I could begin from my father's death or my time at the Institute, but I'm already going to share more than I'm comfortable with. Besides, they have nothing to do with this tale. It will just help explain how I see people. And trust me, how I see people affects this whole story. The way I see people is difficult to explain without sounding crazy. I've been seeing ghostly insectoid forms on people since I was about 11. And yes, doctors did try to treat this as a mental illness from the first time I reported to them. And no amount of treatment has ever cured me of this, despite what drugs or therapy I've undergone. So, after a few years of me trying and failing to cure this illness, I started lying to the doctors about being able to see them, and begun trying to understand it on my own. It really wasn't until I met her that I begun to understand what the things I saw on people were, or as I called them in those days, bugs. Her bugs appeared as a swarm of butterflies made of light. And given I've never seen a bug quite like hers before, or even find any afterwards that were quite as beautiful as hers, my attraction and interest in her couldn't be helped. Who is the her I'm referring to? To me in those days, just the girl with the beautiful butterflies. But I'm sure to most people this is how she would have looked. A girl who hid too much of her face underneath a thick mane of black, unkempt hair, who wore oversized, plain clothing, so all-encompassing her body that it made you wonder what she was hiding underneath them. It wasn't until some of her friends took notice of my habit of watching her that the wheels were set in motion. One day, I noticed another unusual bug that I've never seen before, flying around the common area where I frequently saw the butterfly girl. They were like a weird hybrid between a firefly and wasp, where the tail split downwards into a stinger and upwards into a blinking bulb close to twice the size of its wasp-like body. That wasn't even the weird thing about them. Trust me, I've seen weirder looking bugs on people before. And that was the problem. They weren't on anyone in particular. If any of these bugs weren't buzzing around the room, they had that wicked down-hook singer sunk into someone who had a completely different set of bugs on them. I was lost in thoughts and theories on the appearance of these oddly behaving bugs until I felt a tingle on the back of my neck. The cold hope that it wasn't what I thought it was broken when I felt a slight pain at the base of my skull. Almost without thinking about it, my hand came down on it. It felt like a huge pimple popping there. I clamped down on the mess and brought my fist around to the front of my face, hoping to only find pus in it. When I opened it, I almost threw up when I found the crushed remains of a big bulbed bug plastered to the palm of my hand. After my horror and nausea started to fade, I became aware of a high-pitched cry from nearby. I saw a trail of blinking bugs stagger drunkenly down the hallway, towards the source of the voice, still obviously in pain. Most of the people in the cafeteria followed the bugs unknowingly, with either their bodies or eyes. Yet there were two oddities among them, headed straight towards me. There was a skinny guy with glasses and centipedes crawling on him, leading a menacing-looking guy with a glare firmly fixed on me. It wasn't apparent what bug the big guy had on him until it became clear that Centipede Boy wasn't leading him, but deterring him from any violent action against me. Why, the one boy's lips flapped. The other one raised a fist, and that's when I saw it. He had black and gold beetles actually embedded in them. I watched as the beetle's rear cover popped open and translucent bat-like wings came out flapping. I was transfixed on the bugs as red mist poured out of the rear of it and slowly enveloped the whole fist. It was a good thing too, because once that mass got big enough, with a small flick of his wrist, he sent it flying at me. In that moment, I was thankful for the Institute, because if I've learned anything from my time there, it was this. When something's thrown at you, you either dodge or brace yourself for impact. In my case, I did both. I'm not sure whether it hit me or the force of me throwing myself out of the way of it or just the pure shock of what just happened, but my head was spinning as I laid there on the ground. After a couple of dazed seconds, I looked up to find Centipede Boy hanging over me, with his hand out offering to help me up. The hand had one of his purplish gray bugs crawling on it, and despite it being a better alternative to a hand with a black and gold beetle on it, I still got up without his assistance. After a flippant remark about my fall, he introduced himself as Matthew, and his friend with the scowl as Jason. I wasn't sure how to respond, given just what happened. It seemed that acknowledgement on my behalf wasn't needed, because Matthew continued to talk, explaining to me how they were curious about my interest in a girl named Nikki. I was a bit confused by the flurry of words Matthew threw at me, and Jason's still threatening presence, so I dumbfoundedly asked, "Who?" "The girl you're always staring at. The one with the really long black hair." Jason spoke to me for the first time, pumping as much hostility in the one simple sentence that he could muster. "Oh, her?" I said, surprised that anyone even took notice of me, much less my discreet glances of her. "I guess I do occasionally look in her direction." "Don't lie to me. I've seen you stare at her." "And how did you do that to Sarah?" He accused me by pointing a dirty finger at my chest. He probably would have continued on and touched me with that beetle-encrusted hand if I didn't do anything. So I brought down the fist of the hand, with the bug remained still in it, onto the back of his outreached hand. I heard and felt the crunch of the bug, and watched the brute's arm drop to the side of his body. The guy just stared at his downed hand as intently as I was, until Matthew stepped up to his friend's side. "What the hell?" Matthew exclaimed as he continued to go on some speech about why did I do that when all we were trying to do is have a nice friendly conversation with you. "Yeah, right," I replied, stopping him in his tracks. His eyes grew almost as wide as his thin, trendy pair of glasses as his centipede started to hiss. "What the hell are you?" "I am me," I said confidently, and walked out of the room before either of them could notice how I started to shake.